2024 is upon us, which means it's time to look back at 2023 and list off my top 15 favorite of the year. I contemplated doing a top 10 instead of 15, but it felt like there were more than 10 movies that I wanted to talk about. Just a couple of disclaimers before I jump in. First of all, obviously, I have not seen every film that came out this year, but I feel like I've seen enough. I think it's like 93 or 94, all of which I have ranked on my Letterboxd. And for all but like one or two of these, I have a full-length review that you can find on my channel, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about each entry. Just going to list off the film and why I think it deserves to be talked about in the best of the year. Also, this is just my opinion, and remember that it's okay to have a different opinion, and I would love to hear what you guys enjoyed this year as well, so let me know what your top 10 or even top 5 would be down in the comments. One last thing, unlike my spoiler-free reviews, this video will contain spoilers for all 15 of these, so if you see one listed that you don't want to know what happens, then make sure you click off and come back after you've seen it. Now let's kick things off with some honorable mentions, and a lot of these aren't masterpieces, they're just films that I wanted to give a shout out to that came fairly close to making the list. First up, Saw X. I'm as surprised as you are because I'm not a Saw guy at all, but this was just everything that I've wanted from a Saw sequel since the original. Focus on John Kramer, solid tension, and a really good moral battle between him and some pretty awful human beings that he puts in his traps. Next up, Reality, a very straightforward and very short adaptation of real-life FBI transcripts about this really interesting story of this woman who served time in prison for leaking some information. It was just really rock solid and grounded by a great performance by Sydney Sweeney. Next up, Sanctuary, a wild game of cat and mouse between a dominatrix and her client. Gotta say, performances are another standout in this one, particularly Margaret Qualley. Just a few more to go. Next up is Extraction 2, some of the best action sequences of the year. The story might not be top tier, but it was highly entertaining and I think a vast improvement on its predecessor. Then we have Air, which proves that Ben Affleck really can direct and he wasn't just a one-time hit. A lot of great performances in here and it's generally just an enjoyable, entertaining underdog story. Lastly, Priscilla, another film that I think was carried by a phenomenal performance, this time by Kaylee Spaney as Priscilla Presley. After a very straightforward biopic of Elvis from the previous year, it was just interesting to see the other side of the story because this is adapted from her memoir. Maybe I included a few too many honorable mentions there, but oh well, we're through them now. Let's jump into the list with number 15, which is Talk to Me, a really solid original piece of paranormal horror that not only has a lot of original ideas from the Philippou brothers, but also I think it has a lot of the staples that fans of this subgenre like. It has gore, it has jump scares. I was very invested in the protagonist, and I think it gives her a really interesting character arc and an ending that I will absolutely remember for a long time. But above all else, it's just so cool how they took this idea. I mean, we've seen movies about characters interacting with haunted relics before, but the use of this hand and the fact that it was used as like a TikTok sensation amongst teenagers was really cool. It sounds dumb and cheesy, but in execution, I think it was a great film. Number 14, Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. If there's one film that I did not expect to be on this list, it would probably be this one. Dramatic, character-driven films are not exactly Guy Ritchie's MO. Usually he makes really over-stylized action flicks with a lot of people just yelling at each other with quick, quippy dialogue. But this was a very focused, honed-in story on two characters who form a bond and vow to protect each other. Jake Gyllenhaal and Dar Salim are both great. And I know war movies, especially ones that take place in the more modern ages in Afghanistan, etc., can be a bit of a touchy subject, but I think this movie does a great job of keeping things apolitical and just focusing on these two characters, which is what I really like about it. Number 13 is Infinity Pool. One of the first movies I saw this year, is also one of the best, and leave it to a Cronenberg to create a really demented premise like this. Criminals facing repercussions of their actions by cloning themselves and having those clones executed. It's such a crazy out there idea, but that's what works about it. In addition, I think it has some really intelligent satire on upper class snobbery, but it also has plenty of body horror and psychological thrills if you're into that sort of stuff too. And also it has Mia Goth in it. That's just automatically a positive. Number 12 is Scream 6. I can already tell some people are going to be disappointed with this one making it onto the list. Scream 5 made it on last year. And I don't know, I have a soft spot for this franchise, and I think it comes down to the fact that they're very self-aware while still indulging in slasher tropes. And if you watch this channel a lot, you'll probably know that I'm not a big fan of slashers as is, But I don't know, there's something so fun about this. I like the characters. I like that it's self-aware, but it's not a flat-out comedy. It still has a lot of tension, and I think this one has some of the best chase sequences. The New York City setting was a nice change, and I think this one has great pacing too. Sure, it's ridiculous how some of the characters survive ridiculous amounts of damage, and the killer reveal was one of the weaker in the franchise, but I don't know, man. Scream has not missed yet. At least not for me. I had a lot of fun with this one. Number 11 is The Holdovers. This is one of 2 films on this list that I actually increased my score on after having watched them a second time or just thought about them a little bit more. And I do still think this film is a little bit overlong and perhaps unfocused at times, but man, Paul Giamatti, he delivers probably my favorite performance of the year in this film. And it's really heartfelt, surprisingly authentic in its character work, pitting this grumpy middle-aged teacher with this student, neither of who want to be there over Christmas break, but they're forced to do what they can with what they've got. And watching them learn things from one another and grow was really satisfying, and it's definitely an endearing holiday movie that I'll probably watch again sometime in the near future. Number 10 is Evil Dead Rise. Another horror franchise is now 5 films in and has yet to miss, in my opinion. I very much liked the 2013 Fede Alvarez remake, but this takes the best elements of that and also injects its own little style to it. And I mean, the basic premise is very similar in a lot of these films. People go somewhere that's isolated, they mess with the Necronomicon, which they absolutely shouldn't have done, and then one by one they start getting possessed by these demonic forces and killed off one by one. But much like Scream 6, this moves the setting from the cabin in the woods to a rundown LA apartment building, and I think the added layer of a demon using its host's motherhood as a weapon was really devious and an awesome twist. It has the right blend of gore, pure terror, and humor, and it's definitely anchored by Alyssa Sutherland's performance as probably the scariest deadite ever. Number 9 is John Wick Chapter 4. I really hope they end it here with this one, man. This is a proper 3-hour string of ridiculous action sequences, some of which are all-timers, such as the club scene, the endless staircase that Keanu Reeves falls down for like 5 minutes, and the sequence that is shot as a bird-eye view as he's using that dragon breath shotgun that feels like it was ripped straight out of a video game is so awesome. The reason I hope they end it here is because I don't want this franchise to start to feel like they're just pondering on trying to find new ways to resurrect the character, because the way they ended here, I prefer to think that John Wick died and is finally at peace. As long as they don't mess with this ending with future installments, I think this is one of the best, if not the best, John Wick movie and one of the best action movies we've gotten in the last decade. Number 8 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is the other film on my list that rose quite a bit after I rewatched it a few times. I think I just had different expectations the first time I watched it. It's different than what I was thinking it was going to be. All of our main characters survived, and more than anything else, it was a story about Rocket. But the more I think about it, it really does come up with a good send-off for each and every character. It does feel a bit emotionally manipulative in the way that it uses the harm of small, cute animals to generate emotion, but it was extremely effective in bringing tears to the eyes nonetheless. And I've come to really appreciate everything about this more than I did the first time I watched it. I don't know why that happened. Number 7 is Oppenheimer, probably Christopher Nolan's most ambitious film to date, and it's interesting that a movie like this, the thing that I remember most about it is not the actual bomb test itself, but rather the really intimate character work done with a huge number of characters, actually. The cast of this film is enormous. So many standouts in there. I think Cillian Murphy is absolutely in the run for Best Actor. It's another one of those films that I think runs a little bit long for my taste, but man, it has a lot of content to offer, and I would say it's probably at least in Nolan's top 5. Number 6 is Killers of the Flower Moon. Here we have another 3.5 long film. I always sigh when I see that a movie that I'm about to go see has a runtime this long, but I guess it's a testament to how good of a filmmaker Martin Scorsese is that he's able to make something this long feel so devastating, important. It's also brilliantly acted, and it brings light to a story that I knew very little about, the Osage murders. In fact, I went into this pretty much blind, so I had no idea what kind of characters Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro would be playing. Turns out there's some pretty awful human beings. And yeah, this movie is a little bit dreary at times, but you know what? It kept me invested for 3.5 hours. I think that says something. Number 5 is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Shame Part 2 got delayed, but this was a great start. It's not the best Mission Impossible film, that I can admit to, but I think it still has some excellent action sequences. It's crazy that they're now 7 films in and they continue to top themselves in terms of stakes and crazy life-threatening stunts that Tom Cruise will do without hesitation. I think it would have gotten easy for this movie to feel convoluted too, with the inclusion of AI being the main villain, but they incorporated that into the story in a way that I thought was very clever. This is another long film, almost 3 hours long. I think it was like 2 hours and 45. I have rewatched it once since it came out on VOD. And other than John Wick, there really aren't many other action franchises that can hit that standard. Number 4 is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now let's get it out of the way right now. This takes all of the magnificent visual style that first film has, and it carries it over breathtakingly. But in a year that's filled with a lot of superhero movie duds, it's nice to see one where you can tell everybody poured their heart and soul into it. And not just on a technical standpoint, it's also a very intimate story about Miles Morales. Despite the fact that they throw the multiverse into the mix, which could have backfired, I think a lot of people are getting tired of that being used as a plotline and an ability to just add fan service and bring in characters from other universes. But here, it's utilized in a way that doesn't feel like it's just fan service. It also furthers the arc of our main character. And I know it does kind of leave off at a cliffhanger, but that cliffhanger was so good that I'm like, I'm there, man. I want to see the next one now. That's what a good cliffhanger does. So yeah, this one's awesome. Number 3 is Godzilla Minus One. I gotta be honest, I did not expect to even have a desire to see this, but I heard some early buzz about it, so I showed up for an early screening. And man, this is, as a Godzilla fan, I gotta say this is one of the best Godzilla films ever, if not the best. Might even top that 1954 original if you ask me, just because it portrays the scale of Godzilla so well. The attack sequences in this are top notch. You feel the size of this monster, you feel the threat, but you also feel for the characters because it establishes them very well early on. I don't know that I've ever really cared for the human characters to this degree in a Godzilla movie. And they utilize this hulking monster as a metaphor for a broken post-war Japan in such a strong way. Despite the fact that it's a monster movie, I think it has one of the tightest scripts of the entire year. Speaking of tightly written scripts, number 2 is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. This is not the biggest or flashiest movie of 2023, but I think it is one of the best written in terms of its character work. Kelly Freeman Craig proves herself to be the person you want to direct your coming-of-age novel if you're going to have it adapted. This movie's quite funny. It's extremely well-rounded in terms of its characters, and it's about more than just religion. It really is just the all-encompassing story of a young girl encountering a lot of changes in her life and how she deals with them. And here's another one with some of the best performances of the year, particularly Rachel McAdams and Kathy Bates. I wish more people were talking about this one, man. But number 1 has to be Poor Things for me. I can't remember the last time I've been really hyped for a movie beforehand and I've gone in and actually had that hype satisfied more than I even expected. It's just a bizarrely brilliant spin on Frankenstein. Also a feminist story that largely follows the odyssey of one character as she explores the world and herself. I think it's actually adapted from a novel, but above all else, Yorgos Lanthimos, he injects his style in this to the 100, and I think it pays off so much, not only in being a dramatic film, but also quite funny, and a lot of dark humor in there. Emma Stone is breathtaking as this woman who essentially has the brain of a child surgically implanted into her as she's brought back to life from the dead. And we see her go through this accelerated life cycle, essentially. The production design is incredible. Again, the performances, and not just Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe are huge standouts as well. It's so weird and out there that it's absolutely not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. But for me, it was definitely movie of the year. And there it is, my list of the top 15 best films of the year. I have yet to see The Iron Claw. It's the one movie that came out this year that I'm hoping to still catch before the end of the year, but I wanted to get this video out before New Year's. It's possible that I'll go see The Iron Claw and decide that it should have been on this list. I just wanted to at least put that in there in case people are wondering why it's not on here, because I've heard nothing but great things about it. Once again, I want to hear from you guys. Let me know what your favorite films of the year are down in the comments. I will be putting out a video of the top 15 or top 10 worst. I don't want to be super negative, so we might go with 10 instead of 15. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.